I was starting to tell something about some of the notables that we came across in Honduras. But tape number 5 was making so much noise we left off. But now I'm beginning again. Well, now there was Mr. Marston. And Mr. Marston, for some reason, carried the name of Mr. Marston. He was quite a character in his day, his younger years, but he was a gentleman and an American. And I don't know the circumstances that brought him down to Honduras, but whoever there he was. And he and 2 other men, one an Irishman by the name of Tom Nestor, another American, I don't know his name, and I never had the pleasure of meeting with him. However, these 3 men got together and staked out a piece of ground in no man's land. That is, on the far further side of the banana company's ground, and the far side of Trujillo. As you go to Nicaragua, there is lots of ground in that direction, even unmapped yet. So these 3 men thought that they would stake out a piece of this ground and grow bananas and sell those bananas to the banana company to ship up to the United States. Quite a few people did this, and these 3 men got quite a large piece of ground and began to clear it up. They built themselves a house first of all and fixed things up so that they could be at least a little comfortable. They needed some workmen, and they were about to look for them when a band of men arrived near where they had built their little house, and they inquired how to get to Port Castillo, that they were going to look for work. So these 3 men told them they needn't go any further. They could give them work. They were just starting in, and there was plenty of cleaning up to be done, and preparation for the planting of the banana bits. That's the root. They call them bits. And they give employment to this band of men. I'm not sure how many there were. Now then, seeing that they lived so far away, it was customary for one of these men, sometimes they took it in turn, to go and meet the train in Seco. The train came from Puerto Castillo twice a week in those days, and they had ordered provisions. These provisions came by train, and they went to Seco and brought the necessary things to eat. And on this occasion, it was Tom Nestor's time to go. So Tom went, and the train came in, and there were no provisions. Nothing came. Now, in ordinary times, he would have waited until the next train would come along in 2 or 3 days' time. But somehow he felt that he ought to get back home again. So he started off to get back. I'm not sure how long it took to do the trip, quite a few hours. And as he got nearer the home, on the path, he saw something that attracted his attention. It he could not make out what it was until he came up nearer. And as he came nearer, he was convinced that it was a man that was lying on the path. And when he came up and got nearer, he saw that it was one of his companions. It was this dear man that we have told you about, Mr. Marston. And there he was lying in the path. And he had been wounded, evidently, and he was all blood. And the blood was flowing from him. And Tom Nestor did the best he could for him. And he found some tree branches and made a little shelter over his head to keep the strong tropical sun that was beaming down so hot. And he made Mr. Marston as comfortable as could be. And he went along then to where he lived with the other two men to get help. But when he got near the place, he saw there was a goat standing in the doorway. Now, they had bought some goats there to have some goat milk, but the goat wasn't accustomed to stand in the doorway. So he wondered, what's wrong? And there was no sign of life about. So as he got nearer and went to the door, he found his other companion, the other American. I don't know his name, as I have said. But there he was, and he found that he was dead, all cut up with a machete, and big cuts all over him. And there he lay. So Tom did not know what to do. And the best thing that he could do, he thought, was to go at once back to Seco and see if he could find any help there, or see if anyone could suggest anything. So off he started, and he had taken some water back with him so that Mr. Marston could have some water. So he went on then to Seco and advised the authorities and all there what had happened. Arrangements were made for a Red Cross car to come out, that's a railroad car, and take Mr. Marston into the hospital. And the authorities, they came out to see what was wrong. Now it appears that when they pieced the information that they could get together, that these band of men that had been working for them, well, thought that they had money. And they took the occasion when one was gone to go into the house and see what they could find. But of course they encountered some little opposition, and the result was that this band of men had killed the American that I never had the pleasure of meeting, and they also left this other man half dead, and they had found him on the path that we've already mentioned, away from the house, and they left him half dead. The other man they had killed. So there they were, and they could do nothing, the authorities, only take a hole and bury the American that was dead. So there they were, and they got Mr. Marston to the hospital, and of course he was all cut up, and infection had started in. But seeing it was the tropics and the maggots had got into the wound, and that's what saved his life. So the doctors thought that they cleaned up all the poisonous stuff that there was and left the wounds practically clean. But however, Mr. Morrison had to spend some considerable time in the hospital. And when we met with him at the first, well, he was convalescent. He was had his little strength back, but he didn't have very much. And he had to take life very, very easily. And we had the pleasure of inviting that dear man up to our home, and had the pleasure of speaking to him and pointing him to the Savior. And he listened very attentively. And one remark he said, I always remembered in days to come. If I thought that, he said, as you think, I would get up in the housetop, and with all the power that I had, I would advise everyone to come to the Savior. That's what he had said. Now then, as time went on, we got to know him better, and had often long talks with him. However, as time went on, he could not, it wasn't possible to live as he thought he would in this banana plantation. So he had to give that idea up. Now, he was an old soldier at one time, I understand, and he had a little pension from that, and that helped to keep him. However, he made a trip to San Pedro Sula, and while he was walking along the streets of San Pedro Sula, he found an ex-wife of his. He had been married years ago, but as for some reason or other, he and his wife had become separated. They weren't divorced or anything like that. They had just separated. So here he found this dear woman again. She was happy to see him. Now the result was that they went again and lived together once more. And that dear woman was quite a help to him in his illness and his weakness. And eventually that dear man received Christ as his Savior. And he attended the meetings in San Pedro Sula quite a bit while he was living there. And then as time went on, he got weaker and passed away, went home to be with the Lord, which indeed was much better. Now we'll leave him, and we'll now tell you about Tom Nestor. Now Tom Nestor was the only one that was left of the three to look after this banana plantation. So he started in and tried to do the best he could under the circumstances. He got a younger man to come along and live with him and help in the housework, especially to cook and such things, while Tom was busy in the plantation supervising and looking after that which was necessary. So on this particular occasion, Tom Nestor went out to do some hunting. They had been able to, kill some animals that were good for eating. And this night he went out hunting to see if he could find any fresh meat. Well, he did. He found something, tip of squinty or something like that, and brought it home and that was about 2 o'clock in the morning. And he woke up this young man, told him that he had found something, and said that you had better get up and dress it. And he said, yes, I'll do that all right. So this man got up, and but instead of going and carrying out his duty and dressing this animal, he got the machete. That's the long knife that they use there for everything, of course. And the first thing that Tom Nestor knew was that he felt something very hot in his 2 legs. And here it was this man with a machete. And he started to just fall into Tom with the machete, and cut up his legs, and then his arms, and his face, and all over, and left Tom half dead. In fact, I think he thought that he had killed him. So off went this man altogether, out of sight. And there was Tom Nestor left all alone in this lonely place, wounded, the blood flowing from his wounds. Now he had sense enough to pull a bucket of water over near where he was lying, and this is what kept him alive. And he got the bed mattress and pulled out the stuffing and stuffed the wounds with the stuffing of the bed mattress. And he lay there, practically unconscious and unable to do anything for himself. The only hope that he had, that he remembered he had made arrangements with someone to come to see about a pig that he had for sale. This man was to come in 2 days' time, and that was the only hope that he had. So as he lay there suffering, stuffing in the old mattress, stuffing in his wounds, having a sip of water once in a while, he kept himself alive. Eventually this man did come, and when he saw the conditions of things, he raised the alarm. To do this, he had to go to Seco, quite a journey away, and he summoned help there, with the result that got old Tom Nestor into the hospital in Puerto Castillo. That is the company hospital. And there he was, and he lay there for the longest time. The doctors did what they could for him, and eventually he was able to get on his feet again. And by the use of a cane, he was able to walk. And although he was feeble, yet he could get about from place to place fairly well. Now that was the condition in which he was when we first met him. However, he was an Irishman, and he was an Irish Roman Catholic. And they are the hardest ones to penetrate. You can't hardly touch them at all. They have got their own religion. And that's what he said about my wife. She's the best woman in the world that ever he met. A wonderful woman, if it wasn't for her religion, he said. Well, told Tom then, as time went on, he had been a good friend of the company's. So they had made arrangements for him, and he was taken care of until the day of his death. He lived for some considerable time after that, yes, for several years. and at times I had the pleasure of meeting with him and speaking with him, but that was about all. And we just have to leave him in that condition. Now there's Mr. Marston gone, there's old Tom Nestor gone, and there's the other American gone. That's what happens in this world. Now I'll see how this is and see who else I can tell you about afterward. In our travels, we came across another gentleman by the name of Senior. Now he was living with another Irishman. I'm not sure of his name, I've forgotten it at the moment. But these two men were in a banana plantation of their own. It wasn't very large, but they had started up for some little time, and they also had some dairy cows. And it takes about 9 months for the bananas to be ready for marketing after they're planted, sometimes a little more. So they had quite a few cows, and these cows gave them the milk sufficient to live on. They sold the milk, made cheese, and took it to Fort Castilla, where they sold it. In that way, they were able to keep themselves going while they waited on the bananas. However, sad to say, that was about the time the disease got into the bananas, and I'm afraid that it was not a success. However, these two men were more than middle-aged. One of them, the Irishman, was a little older than the other one. Now, I don't know much about their background. The Senior had come out from England when he was quite a youth, I understand, and he had traveled around quite a bit. And eventually he settled in Honduras for some reason. Now, he was a bachelor, and he got into contact with this Irishman, and they decided they would try their hand in the banana business. Well, however, we went out there and visited them in their farm, and always had an opportunity to tell out the good news of salvation. And this man, Senior, took quite an interest in it. Eventually, he got concerned about things and inquired more and more. And we were able to explain to him in such a way that eventually he took his place as a sinner and received Christ as a Savior. However, he, living with the Irishman, he had opportunities to travel a little bit in his business, which he did. And the Irishman wasn't able for very much, and he stayed at home and looked after the farmyard, looked after the cattle, and did various other things about the place, while his companion, Senior, went out and sold the milk and made and sold the cheese and such like. But this man, Senior, somehow got into contact with one of the native women, and that was his downfall. Evidently, this woman had been a kind of a hypnotizer, or even worse than that. And she had a very bad influence over Mr. Senior. And she could almost make him do what she wanted him to do. And that was a very sad condition indeed for Mr. Senior. He spent some time at our home, and while there, he got up one night in the middle of the night and said that he had to go because this woman was calling for him. And how he got that message, it remains a mystery. However, I was away, my wife was alone, and she had great difficulty in persuading him to go back to bed. It was the middle of the night, it was only about 2 o'clock, and the train didn't leave until 6 in the morning. And eventually he did. He went back to bed. Then he went on then to his own home, and then my wife found him one day in Port Castilla in a very sad condition, all dirt and wet and, well, in a very bad state, and he hardly knew what he was doing. Well, seeing that he was English, we took an extra interest in him, and we had the privilege of speaking to the English consul. We told him about this man, and he made arrangements for him to be taken to the hospital. And he was treated in the hospital for some time, and then he got out and he spent some time at our house again. And we tried to do the very best we could for him. But it was rather difficult under the circumstances. It meant that I had to stay at home. I had to stay at home and practically watch him. And he seemed to be getting worse. So we made arrangements for him to be taken into the hospital in La Ceiba. And to take him there, we had to take some means of conveyance, and the airlines were starting in at that time, so we decided to take him by airplane, which was the easiest method. We wouldn't have any extra anxiety or work, we thought, at least, once we got him in the plane. So I went with him in the plane. But even there, well, before I knew it, we got up in the plane. Now, let me explain. It was just a 3-seater plane. There was room for 2 passengers behind the pilot. That was about all in the baggage. So, as soon as we got up in the air, what do you think? This man, Senior, he opened the door. And I had to do some quick work to get a hold of him and push him back into the seat. Fortunately, the door opened against the wind, so the wind practically kept it closed. That was one thing that saved the situation. We got him eventually to the hospital, and there he was for some little time. By that time, of course, the financial part of the business was rather low, and the hospital was doing the very best for him, but he needed medicine. So I went out and saw his companion. He said, well, I don't know what we can do. He blamed this Englishman for a whole lot of things. Well, I said, be it so, I don't know. That's the condition he's in at the moment, and he needs medicine, so the doctors tell us. Well, he says, what I could do is sell a couple of cows. He did that, and with that money, we were able to get the medicine for this man's senior. And however, he didn't live for so very long, and he passed away. But I believe that he was a real saved man at the same time. He belonged to the Lord. And although he had this experience with this woman, you would hardly understand unless you knew something about what these witch doctors and these other women, what they can do. They hypnotize men in such a way that, well, it's difficult to explain. We knew another man that was the same thing happened to him. And he was so ill that he was taken to the hospital. And even in the hospital, this woman, another woman of course it was, and she got in somehow and took the medicine with her. Now they can make up some kind of medicine with herbs and leaves and, oh, I don't know what, not all. And they give that to someone, and that drives them a kind of, well, not altogether crazy, but it gives them some kind of a funny, strange inclination to be under the thumb of the person who gave it. And this man got that from the woman in the hospital. She stole in somehow and got this medicine to him. And that was his downfall completely. He didn't live very long after that. It drove him out of his mind practically. And it's a rather difficult thing to explain these things. But we have seen them happen at the same time. The same woman that was supposed to hypnotize the senior, I knew where she lived. And one day while I was passing out gospel tracts, I came to her house unexpectedly, and she invited me in for a cup of coffee, but I inclined the invitation, and somehow I was very much on the alert as to these things as I went in and out amongst the people, because you never can tell what is happening or what could happen. So one is safer to be on the alert all the time. And in this way you can avoid many unpleasant things. And thank the Lord, I was kept from many of these things that might have indeed brought difficulties into one's life. Mr. Mack comes to mind, so I'll just tell you about him. He came from the western part of the United States at one time. I can't tell you when, of course, but he was in Honduras for quite a long time. Now, as I said before, many foreigners are found down in that place, the land. They came down for various reasons. Some had to run from the United States, while others came down in other business. How he came down, we don't know, but he traveled about quite a lot, evidently. And he tried his hand at various things. Now, coal mining, I mean gold mining, is quite an attraction down this way. And there has been money made out of it. But on the other hand, money has been lost. It's quite a venture. But well, there is gold in certain rivers that can pan out a little, out of that, but to go into it in a good, profitable way, one needs money and needs equipment and everything else. But very few have the facilities to have the luxury of those things down in this part. So he might have panned out a living for a little while, but he had traveled about, and eventually he got into the Carib Indian villages, and there he established himself and made quite a lot of money by having a little store. The store, of course, he had sold salt and sugar and groceries and things like that. Dry goods and materials, as all those people make their own clothing. And they buy the material and make the dresses, and of course making gentlemen's pants is quite a business there. So he was the supplier for all of those things in some of these villages. So he was able to make himself quite a good living and store up some money for the future. He knew quite a lot about these people, the Carib Indians, and I myself learned a lot from him about them. However, we'll leave some of that to the future date. But anyhow, he came around to Trujillo while we were living there. And we got to know him. And of course, our house was the center for all foreign activities. Anyone that came from a foreign land somehow found our house. And there was an open door for them always. There was something to eat, and we generally found a place for them to sleep. So this dear man came along, and we took him in. When he came, he gave my wife a package to keep for him. Well, she thought it was ammunition, something like that, for it's pretty heavy. So she took that package, and we left it, just threw it in amongst the soiled clothes and left it there by itself. And he stayed for a couple of weeks or so. But there was one thing my wife didn't like about him. When he came in, he would come to where she was and keep close to her. If she went to the kitchen, he followed her to the kitchen. If she went into the living room, there he was. He was always right beside her. And he had quite an act of sitting down on his hunkers and talking to whoever was there in that position. And he made himself at home. And then the time came that there was time to go. And he was supposed to go on the train. But he asked my wife if she would very kindly go down with him to the train. He went a little early. And instead of going to the train, he got on the little boat that was going off. And this boat was going to one of the islands that you find on the coast, the northern coast of Honduras. But eventually he was going to Belize, and that was to British Honduras. And before going, he asked my wife to kindly given the package that he had given to her, or the money, rather, he said. Well, she didn't remember him giving any money. She said, money? And he said, yes, I gave you a package of money. Well, my wife was rather much afraid because she couldn't remember anything about money. But she did remember that he had given her a package and that she knew where she put it. So she went and got it to him. He said, yes, it's money. She had quite a sum of money there. It was into the thousands. Lots of it was gold, old gold coins, other silver coins. And he was taking that with him. He was evidently leaving Honduras for good. And at last we found out why that he kept so close to my wife. He was afraid that someone would do him harm. He was afraid that they were after him. Now, of course, we didn't know anything about that. But so it appeared anyhow. And he kept very close to her all the time. And that was why, I suppose, he followed her about. Well, this is not the only time my wife was a safety guard for some of these dear people down there. Perhaps I'll tell you something more about that later. But however, he kept with her and got down, and he told her on the way that he was going by boat. He wasn't going by train. And he tried to keep as close to her as he could until he got onto the boat. And then, of course, when he got onto the boat, he disappeared out of sight. I suppose he thought he was pretty safe there. So away he went. And that's the last that we ever knew of him. There are other things about him I haven't told you. Some things I've forgotten. It's not very easily to remember everything that one comes across. There were, of course, some other notables living around that part. And many of them I've forgotten about. One man by the name of Stevenson, I think his name was. Well, he lived way in the backwoods, and he had a little shack that he made himself, and he was accustomed to sit on his door with a gun across his knees. And anyone that tried to get near him, well, he would lift the gun, and that was enough. They would make a hasty retreat out of his sight. Evidently, he didn't care about neighbors or company. There were others too. Well, in fact, Honduras in the bygone days was quite a place for those who were fleeing from the law. The first time I heard of Tegucigalpa or Honduras was way back in the year 1921 or 22 in Los Angeles. Now, the circumstances was over a lady who killed another one. And I think it was known as the Meda murder, or the Hammer murder. And there was a lady by the name of Mrs. Phillips. And she was captured and put in prison. But however, she escaped by someone getting a rope, and she fastened it to the upper room where she was and came right down and escaped in that way. Well, eventually they found her in Tegucigalpa, and the sheriff was sent down to get her. If I'm not mistaken, his name was Agalus. And he went down to Tegucigalpa and brought her home. His wife went along with him, and she contracted some kind of a tropical disease there, which she never got over, and that was the cause of her death. So I remember way back in those years, there was quite a talk about those things.